but I've been about as good and as faithful a husband as a man can be.
What is it we do in the Red Pill? We swap notes. Now, I'm sure people have heard all kinds of different stories about us, but I'm here to give you a glimpse inside the locker room. Here, we're going to discuss the field reports that happened a few years back. Brand new guys who are trying to learn the strategies that we talk about. Who am I? I used to be one of these brand new guys. I, like you, was pretty good at women and relationships, but I wasn't great at it. Hard times hit, things got tough, and it turns out there's nowhere for a man to go nowadays that actually wants him to succeed, to thrive, to get better at what he does and improve his lot in life. So, like most guys, I took it upon myself, found a bunch of guys in the same boat as me, and together we built a set of working strategies based on the experience of hundreds of thousands of men, just like us. Men swapping notes, iron sharpening iron. Welcome to the locker room.
I'm 37, an active Mormon, 3 kids, and a stay-at-home mom. I draw the line in infidelity, so I know I'm hampering my effectiveness, and that's okay. This is on hard mode, so it's what I signed up for. I started 6 months ago. The last 10 years, I've been a compliant, needy, sickening beta, working my butt off for regular starfish and servicing a couple times a week. Doing all I could to win back the affection, the love, and the desire she showed our first 5 years. I was really pathetic about trying to get those first 5 years back and tried everything under the sun to get her interested in again. She's super controlling around sex and my relationships with other women and has serious trust issues. I agreed to all her conditions and rules, and 10 years later, her trust issues seem to stem from somewhere else that I can't fathom. But I've been about as good and as faithful a husband as a man can be. Most of the distrust is from me telling her about coworkers flirting with me and shutting it down. So far, the wife showed good signs of responding when I started, but here's the deal. I'm trying to be transparent in my marriage. I talk too much, tell her too much, and I don't shut the F up enough. I think honesty is an important foundation in a marriage, but I think I take it too far. She thinks I don't take it nearly far enough. I've kept some pictures of her that she wanted me to destroy 5 years ago, and 2 months ago I finally told her I had kept them. Damaged some trust, and that was my bad for not being man enough to deal with her anger 5 years ago and keep it from her. After that, I decided to put all the cards on the table. She asked for my journal I've been writing, trying to figure out our marriage and sexuality for the last 2 years. I gave her the whole thing. But I did record that I had an epiphany 6 months ago about what had worked with her and what hadn't. And sometimes her body responded when her mind didn't, and that really made her angry. I told her I was done with all the rules I had agreed to in the last 10 years, and that I was going to keep my marriage promises of fidelity to her, avoiding affairs and avoiding porn, but I was going to do my own thing and get ideas about this wherever I wanted outside of her control. She flipped out as I asserted my frame and staged interventions with family, friends, and counselors. I agreed to it all as I'm an open book. I'm in counseling now, but shopping for a new one as ours is retiring. She also insisted on a month of abstinence. I agreed to that, and now we're a week past. She gave me a hard no yesterday. I keynoted a lot, but pretty mild stuff. She seems to be reacting negatively to every masculine, red-pilled trait. When I keynote, she says it's not congruent with how I'm treating her. Really, how she's feeling about me not being a compliant, needy, obedient beta. When I keynote a bit heavier, she calls it sexual abuse, assault, or molestation. When I amuse mastery, I'm laughing at her and disrespecting her. She says I'm disrespecting her clear boundary of she only wants sex at most once a week and only on the weekend if I initiate any other time. I've simply stopped letting her manipulate me with her emotions. She thinks I'm cold, she thinks I'm callous, she thinks I'm an ass. Paradoxically, she says my actions and most of my words are not kind, but my heart is far from her. I've been focusing on myself, lifting in the evenings, going out with the guys to see movies, do a bunch of stuff with the kids, stuff like that, and she feels neglected. When I set aside an evening to be with her and do something light and fun, she says she can't do light and fun with this disconnect and proceeds to engage with verbal intercourse. I've been withdrawing. She says for the same reason, no mental or emotional connection, she can't even think of connecting physically, and it's extending the abstinence. So maybe I'm not attractive enough. Maybe I was so good at being a beta that it'll take me longer than normal. Or maybe I have a special kind of snowflake that won't respond to this. Could be. Her dad is alpha, and she has no respect for him and liked me because I wasn't like him. The Mormon church raises really good betas focused on service and women putting on pedestals, and I was top notch. I laid out my vision to her of us working on our issues, mine being my own validation and getting over defensiveness and anger, and I think she knows her issues of trust and control but hasn't accepted them as issues. I suggest we work on ourselves for a year and decide if our marriage is working on that point. I said I think we can be happier and closer than we've ever been. She didn't buy it and said she can never fully meet my desires. So the question. I've read that monk mode is essentially for single guys focusing on their mission and not getting distracted. I'm thinking it might be monk mode for me. I'm already involuntarily there, and I'm pretty sure she's holding out on sex as it's the last lever she has to try and get me back into whatever control that I somehow escaped from. A couple terms before we get started. Verbal intercourse. Verbal intercourse is a way of understanding the female need for validation and its equivalence to the male need for sexual gratification. There's a great post we had from it by one of our moderators in the Married Red Pill where he talks about picturing a scene. Picture a guy who gets turned down by his wife and then chases her around the house naked, basically begging her to have sex with him. It's kind of goofy, a little bit weird, fairly creepy. So think of the same way. If a girl isn't really that valuable to you, and she isn't doing anything to add benefit to your life whatsoever, so you decide to walk away, and she follows you around the house demanding that you engage or that you be more emotionally fulfilling, putting all these hoops in the way. It's the same kind of creepy cringiness, and if it's not, it should be. So for a lot of guys, once they understand to treat those two things as equivalent, yeah, you're not entitled to sex, but she's not entitled to attention either. In fact, nobody's entitled to anything. Monk mode. Monk mode is a weird term. I think Illimitable Man was the one who first came up with it. It's the idea of completely shutting yourself off to the world and focusing on your mission to the exception of anything else. I don't like it. The closest example I've seen of somebody describing it is the equivalent of a guy going on a deployment, to the point where you're mission focused on that, which is good. When you're there, you don't have any other choice but to focus on your own needs first. Problem is when guys use it, they use it in the way this guy uses it. As you can see, he used it in the case of his wife deciding to turn him down on a more permanent basis, and then he decided to treat that rejection as if it was a virtue, and it's actually him being a monk. Monks sound cool, right? Well, there you go. Emotional load. This is one of those BS terms that you hear girls bring up all the time when they can't articulate or don't quite know what it is that they're not feeling the attraction that they should to somebody who, in this case, in a marriage. So in one of those throwing spaghetti against the wall moments, they think it's about the emotional connection. And so they throw this out and they make all kinds of hoops for a guy to jump through. The worst part about this is it's not overly malicious. She just knows she doesn't feel desire. She doesn't want any type of sexual contact. And so she's throwing out these terms to delay or to create boundaries. In reality, when a girl's got a healthy set of mental models and has genuine desire for somebody, this emotional stuff doesn't really matter. All it means is that her desire is fueled from her emotional state. The advice for this guy, it's not simple, it's not straightforward, and I would argue he's ignoring glaring red flags in this relationship. We had a few people who, Mormons themselves, other types of Christians, and just general secular married red pill guys, but the problem here is the society that he is surrounded by is designed to help destabilize that marriage. First thing is the wife started crying rape. Anything about sexual abuse is a deal breaker. She is perfectly willing to screw this guy over legally. And he needs to treat that way more importantly than he is. He's still looking at her as if she's on his team. She's not on his team. She's on her team. He also needs to take a note. All those people who she rallied to her cry, telling him what he needs to do, those interventions, every single one of those people are working against his best interests. Not only that, they're actively working in destabilizing the marriage and its future. The worst part is they think they're doing good, but they're really not. They probably all felt very powerful by lording it over him. They're very dangerous people. And this situation is very precarious because when, not if, but when, she decides to nuke this marriage, and most likely over some trumped up, made up sexual assault allegations, they're going to go to her side. And he's going to end up with nobody. And he's going to get zeroed out. And this is usually where guys end up trying to take the final solution. What's in it for you? In this case, it's a good example as to why you need to share these notes with other men. You can't just sit here, read some books, and then think you've got it all figured out. In this case, this guy is full of covert contracts, which is an absolute basic prerequisite to handling your unattractive behaviors. He knows for a fact he talks too much, and then he continues to keep talking. Meanwhile, she's running circles around it with the many tools she has at her disposal. If there was ever a reason to shut the F up, this was one of them. He needs to do that a lot more, and you need to understand that yourself. Your woman is not on your team, and so when you're making these strives, you can't be explaining it to her as you go, because all that she's going to do is just call it bluff. And in this case, it is a bluff. Those pictures that he was talking about ago, you may have some of those yourself. This is a situation called hiding the badness, and you can't do that. If you're doing something, you either need to unapologetically own it, or you need to stop doing it. But the idea of doing it, and then hiding it from her, and then coming out in the end, not only is this you not owning your stuff, it's also you putting the onus of any guilt that you've built up on the other person. And as far as unattractive behaviors go, this one's pretty common, and it's pretty hard. So what does an alternate look like here? First off, he takes his only tools that he has left off the table. I get it, he's Mormon, he's religious, and they have this like fidelity above all, but you know what? Being available for your husband is also part of scripture. So if you're going to ad hoc cherry pick which parts of the scripture you're going to follow, you might as well pick the ones that are beneficial towards you. In that situation where she decides to put a sexual moratorium, well, right there is just about as telling as you need to tell. There is an entire power dynamic in there, and I would suggest you guys go back and look through that and see how it plays out and realize what's happening. He's not in control. He's not even close to in control. At the same time, once this intervention from friends and family to tell him to stop wanting to sleep with his wife within a marriage, I think right there, he needs to have an intervention and tell all these people off and get them out of his life because they are not helpful. Just remember, she offers sex, he offers attention. Now there's a ton more I can get into on this one, and I don't want to make this video 3 hours long, but sometimes it's good to consider that maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze. This one is going to take a lot of work that she's very unwilling to do, all for some ideal that only the one guy bought into. Sometimes it's better just to cut your losses and find a more willing participant. But on that note, thanks for sticking around this long, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care.